Thank you, everyone, for joining us this evening. Really appreciate Rabbi Ribakov opening up the shul and partnering with Chazaq as always. It's always a pleasure doing these shiurim with the congregation, Sephardic congregation of Hewlett. So we appreciate your partnership and always opening up the doors to partner in these amazing shiurim. We're very honored to have Rabbi Akiva Tatz come join us tonight. Should be, as always, if you ever heard his shiurim, they're very, very amazing and deep and inspirational. So thank you, Rabbi Akiva Tatz, for joining us and honoring us with your presence. Everyone knows Chazaq. Throughout the year, we do all these events in all these different communities. And a lot of times people don't know, we do so much more. And we have so many different programs. Maybe here a lot of the congregants know, because we have one of our many Shaping Life Sunday School programs here, where we take public school kids who need education from the youth on up. We have after-school programs for teenagers and beyond. And one of the hidden gems of Chazaq is a program, a division that we call the public school to yeshiva division, where we help kids who are in public school transfer into the yeshiva system and get a nice Jewish education. We all see has been going on in the school systems and everything that's going on. I'm not even going to get into it. So it's quite amazing that since just 2017, we've had over 1,600 now kids who have been transferred into public school, transferred into yeshiva from public school. So Mir Hashem, with everyone's support, would be many, many more. I want to give a thank you to Igor Fatikov for helping sponsor and bring this shiur to life and having the idea. And without him, this event wouldn't have been possible. So we thank you for your efforts. And without further ado, because I'm not the person you guys came to see, I want to welcome Rabbi Akiva Tatz up to honor with some words.
First of all, with the Rabbi's permission, thank you for this chance to learn a bit together, maybe prepare a little bit for Purim, and thank you to your community, and thanks to Chazaq. Right? Everyone has to support Chazaq?
Yes.
So let's think about a subject that is central to this time of year, and basic, very important idea in the spiritual world, something that's relevant to all of us, maybe even especially relevant to ladies. After all, Purim was a woman, Esther, right, who was the real agent of redemption. And in fact, although we men don't like to think about it, it's usually women who pull us through, right? All the difficult times in Jewish history, the Torah tells us that it's women who pulled us through. I think it's probably a misprint, but anyway, that's what it says. But in thinking about that, the subject, the theme of this month, if you like, is laughing, right? Laughing. You know that every month of the year is parallel to a different aspect of the body. We have 12 mazalot. We have 12 organs in the body, 12 different abilities of the body, and the Sefer Yetzirah and Arizal, they talk about the parallels of the 12 to the different abilities of the body. Every month is parallel to a different faculty. For example, Nisan is speaking, right? The first month is speaking. Why do you think Nisan has to do with speaking? What's the connection? Pesach, right? The mouth talks. What's the mitzvah of Pesach? Haggadah, right? Which is talking. So you see, that is the first month of the year. And then there's a month that is connected to hearing and seeing. But what's amazing is that this month of Adar is parallel to laughing, right? Laughter. If you're American, laughter. Right? Laughter and humor. But laughter and humor is the subject of this month, and that's very interesting. Why is that important? When you think about seeing and hearing, walking, speaking, but why is laughter important? Okay, it's nice that we laugh and it gives us pleasure, but why is it one aspect of the 12 aspects of reality? You know, the 12 features of reality are what build the world, right? You see a cube, which is three-dimensional structure. If 4 lines there, 4 lines there, and the 4 lines that join them, right? That's the Yud Bet Kaveh Alachson, the 12 lines that bound the cube. That defines our reality. That's why all that we do has 12, right? 12 Shatim, 12 tribes of the Jewish people, unified in Yaakov, who's the center, which is the 13th. That's why we have the word Echad, which adds up to 13. That's why we Jews, we love 13.
Yeah.
And that's why the non-Jewish world, they're allergic to 13. Right? For them it's unlucky. But each of the 12 is one facet of reality. And the month of Adar is laughing. Adar is the last month of the year, the furthest away from Nisan. Nisan is the month that the Torah says is the beginning of the year, where the birth of the Jewish people takes place. And as you move through the year, you get down to the last month where the spiritual energy is the least. And in that darkness, so dark in fact, that it's the time in which the non-Jews decree genocide on the whole Jewish people. What? That's what happened. The Persian nation decreed genocide against the Jewish people. Real genocide, not like they talk today. Right? Here's the Jewish people trying to defend themselves, they say genocide. We're talking about real genocide. Right? The Persians made a decree that every Jew would die in one day. You're talking about 100% literal genocide. By the way, Persia is Iran. And the decree still applies. And they haven't forgotten, in case you hadn't noticed. We know that the decree that they issued was never retracted. The Gemara tells us that in the ancient world, a king could never retract a decree. Because if you could, no one could ever trust the decree that maybe he changed his mind. That's why Achashverosh, they were unable to convince him to retract the decree. They only got him to make another decree that you have a right to defend yourselves. Does that sound familiar, by the way? The Jews have a right to defend themselves? But the original decree to wipe out the Jewish people was never withdrawn, still in place. So that was the desperately dangerous time for the Jewish people. And that is the month that we celebrate laughter. So let's think about this. The Torah speaks about laughter many times. For example, it says, Yoshev b'shamayim yischak. Hashem who sits in heaven is laughing. Hashem yil'ag lamo. He's mocking them. That means Hashem is mocking the wicked people throughout history, and he's doing it with a mocking laughter. That's a little strange. Jewish history is no laughing matter. For most of history, we've been without a country, in danger of genocide. For 4,000 years, they've been trying to kill us. But something funny is going on behind the scenes. We have another pasuk that says, "Az yemale schok pinu." Then our mouth will be full of laughter. When the Mashiach arrives, we'll laugh fully. From that, the Gemara learns a halacha, which is that your mouth should not be full of laughter in this world. Az yemale. Now, it's not appropriate to laugh fully because there's a world of tragedy. We always remember the sadness. We break a glass at a wedding. The chatan has some ashes on his head. So to have a mouth full of laughter, that's inappropriate. But az yemale, then our mouth will be full of laughter. But it means more than that. It doesn't only mean that then we will laugh. It means when the Mashiach arrives, in somewhere that'll be humorous. But maybe the most difficult thing to understand is that we know that a woman who's spiritually great, can laugh at the day of death. We say, "Vatischak leyom acharon." Right? A woman who is spiritually correctly tuned can laugh at the day of death. That is really weird. And we sing that on Friday night. Do you have such a minhag? You sing Eshet Chayil on Friday night? So here is a Jewish family, and the husband is singing in praise of his wife. And one of the things you say about a woman who's spiritually great is that she can laugh at death. That is very strange. Why is it a woman who can laugh at death? Why is it appropriate to mention that when the Shabbat begins? So let's try to study this idea of laughter and see if we can understand something deep. The first question to ask, I heard this from Rav Moshe Shapira, my great teacher. He told me personally that this was a subject that he figured out himself. There are not many Torah sources on this. The first question is, how do you approach a subject like this? You all study Torah. How do you approach a Torah subject? Where do you begin? In halakha, we know how to do it. I'm sure you're all competent, capable of telling me the halachot of Purim. But how do you approach a subject in Torah which is a deep subject like this? And the answer is we have a method. And the method is that we know that everything that we experience in our world is projected from a higher world. Everything we have in our world, every object, every person, every experience has the Ramchal calls it a koach nivdal. Koach nivdal means something that is higher. Nivdal means transcendent. It stands one level above. That level is more real and less physical. Of course, the koach nivdal has a koach nivdal. Right? And that's an endless sequence. Take an example. You have a person. The person has a body, but inside the person is a koach nivdal. We call that the neshama, the soul. It's less physical, but more real. The soul is much more real than the body. When you marry someone, what you're interested in is the soul, the person. You're not interested in the body. If you marry only for a body, you're on a very vulgar level of human relationship. You need the body. You can't marry without a body. You can't have a friend to embrace without a body. But the body is the external, less real part. It's more physical, more tangible, but less real. Then the neshama has a neshama. And that's an endless sequence. But everything in the world has a koach nivdal. Which means that the principle is that everything Hashem wants you to know about Himself, He projects into the world of your experience. You are not brought into the world to understand the world. You are brought into the world to understand Hashem. You don't engage a person to know their body. You engage a person's body to know the person. You need the body. By watching the face and every gesture and every nuance of expression, you get to know the person inside. Ladies do this better than men usually. Okay. But we all do it naturally. When you speak to a person, you're not watching the body. You're watching what the body tells you about their inner being. So here's the principle. You can never forget this. Everything that exists in Hashem's name, He projects into the world. And everything in the world is projected from His name. And therefore, in order to understand the spiritual world, which is what we're here for, we engage the physical world. We study it, and through that we can penetrate into the spiritual world. Exactly like when you relate to a person, you watch their body, you listen to their words, it's all physical experience, and it teaches you about the reality. So far, so good? Even a trivial thing. You know, people get homesick. The Gemara says, Chena makom al yashvav. The beauty, the charm of a place is always in the eyes of the people who come from that place. Why do we get homesick? So the scientists will tell you, because a few million years ago when you were a pigeon, you know, but that's not true. The reason you get homesick is because your neshama is longing for the place it came from. It knows it came from a perfect place. But in the world of your experience, you long for the place you came from. Or take a deep example. We have a thing called veikut, which is the obligation to bond with Hashem in a way that you lose your ego completely and you bond in that ecstatic connection. And amazingly, if you do that correctly, you learn more about yourself. What should that look like in our world? It should be marriage. Marriage should do two people bonding into each other in a way that they lose themselves and build something more than the sum of the parts. And paradoxically, in such a relationship, you find out more about yourself, and then you should put that back in. The Ramban talks about this in detail. But even something like a marriage experience is there to teach you something much bigger. Every Jewish wedding, by the way, every Jewish wedding is reminiscent of Hashem giving us the Torah. We stood under the mountain like a chuppah. He gave us the Torah like the Chatan gives a ring. We became married to him. Not only that, the Gemara says that if a man forces a woman into a relationship with him, he can never divorce her. You know that law? If a man forces a woman into a relationship with him, if she wants, he has to marry her, and he can never divorce her. And we say, Hashem, you forced us, you held the mountain over us, you can never get rid of us. So we have, every experience in the world is parallel to something higher. And therefore, when we want to know what laughter means, the only way we can study it is, let's study laughter. Let's analyze what it is that makes us laugh, what is human sense of humor. And if we get that clear, we'll understand the spiritual. So let's do that. So human laughter is an extremely strange phenomenon. Very, very strange. Many great thinkers have analyzed it and failed to explain it. There was a famous French philosopher called Henri Bergson, a Jewish actually, maybe 90 years ago. He wrote a book about laughter. It's a classic. Fails to explain the depth of what it means. Sigmund Freud. Any counselors here? Therapists? Psychologists? He wrote a book about jokes. He wrote a whole book about jokes, analyzing the psychological phenomenon of what makes us laugh at jokes. As a scientist, why would we have that? Doesn't explain it fully. Many great thinkers have analyzed humor, and there are many theories. There's a thing called the play theory. Play theory is laughter is a sort of a play activity. There's a superiority theory. That means when you're walking down the street, you see somebody very tall and self-important, and he suddenly slips on a banana peel and falls flat on his back. Right? Which is not funny at all, by the way. But even as you run to help him up, you can't hide a smile because... So you feel superior. He fell, not you. By the way, when you fall a banana peel, not funny at all. It's only funny when it happens to somebody else. By the way, you know there's a difference between American humor and British humor? American humor is a man walks down the street and he slips on a banana peel. British humor, he sees the banana peel, steps over it and falls down a manhole that he didn't see on the other side, right? But there's a thing called a catharsis theory. It means when you laugh, you release spiritual energy. There's pent-up tension, and the laugh releases that. Also not a full explanation. So I'll tell you the secret. The secret is... I'll tell you the secret. The secret of laughter is, and by the way, do you know it's amazing, only human beings can laugh. Laughter is unique to humans. No other part of the universe can laugh. I know you'll tell me about the hyenas, but I'm African and I've watched hyenas and I can tell you they got no sense of humor.
What about wolves? What about dogs?
Not only is humor uniquely human, you can only laugh at something human. There's nothing an object can do that can make you laugh. There's nothing a tree can do that can make you laugh. You can only laugh at a distortion of the human. Nothing an animal can do can make you laugh, unless it looks human. If an animal looks like a human, or a human looks like an animal, then you can laugh at it. That's remarkable. You can only laugh at a distortion of the human. But I'll tell you the secret. The secret of humor is v'na'afoch. V'na'afoch. When a thing goes in one direction and you suddenly realize that's not the direction at all. It's actually the opposite direction. When you suddenly realize that, that makes you laugh. That ecstatic explosion of emotion that we do, when you suddenly realize that you had it exactly wrong, and you know professionals, comedians, they will take you in one direction. When you least expect it, as sharply as possible, they'll reverse it into the opposite. And the amazing thing is, even when what's happening is not funny at all, what's happening is dangerous or embarrassing or humiliating, but when it happens, you laugh. The mother says, Oscar, are you driving on the highway? Yeah, Mom, I'm driving the highway. Oscar, be really careful. The police say that there's some crazy fellow on the highway going the wrong way. He says, Mom, there's hundreds of them. Now, that's not funny. Somebody's going to get hurt. But when you realize... So, amazingly, we laugh at something which isn't pleasant, necessarily, and it's not funny. But when you see that inversion, v'nahafoch, what is the hilarity of Purim? When a thing goes in one direction and you realize that it's exactly the other way, in that moment of inversion, we have that joyful outburst that's called laughter. Obviously, we're talking about a desperate situation in history that will invert to Mashiach. The Ramchal says that when the Mashiach arrives, all the tragedies of history will become, you'll realize why they were necessary and built the Geula. You know, why do we say that it's a woman who can do this? The reason is that a woman in her body goes through an inversion that is impossible. When we say Vatischach Yom Acharon, a woman has been in her body through an inversion that we call birth, which is an impossibility. Completely impossible. You know, the Rambam, who was a doctor, the Rambam describes this. He says when a woman's giving birth, it looks clearly like two people are dying. Ladies, I don't mean to put you off. I'm sure you'll enjoy it. But don't ask a man to go through that. I can tell you, I've delivered many, many babies. I can tell you, if I had to go through that, I'd need therapy the rest of my life. I mean, there's no question. But what the woman goes through, right, which looks clearly, does not look like she's having fun, is nothing compared to what the baby goes through. The baby in the womb, when it's born, goes through an inversion that's completely impossible. Do you know a child in the womb is living with 20 conditions that keep it alive that spell instant death when it's born? A baby in the womb has holes in his heart. He's got the blood going in the wrong direction. He's got a major blood vessel going away from the lungs in the wrong direction. He's got no lungs. The baby in the womb has little scrunched up bits of tissue. He's got blood vessels coming out through his liver. He's got the wrong sort of blood. He got 20 conditions that keep him alive underwater with no air to breathe, which guarantee death within 2 minutes after he's born. They're all wrong. And you have 20 conditions in your body that keep you alive. If you gave him to the baby in the womb, you'd kill him immediately. You're not talking about a difference. You're talking about a complete inversion of impossibility. The child has got conditions that keep it alive. Each one spells death when he's born. And I'm telling you from personal experience, you deliver this little baby, you hold him in your hands, he goes blue, then he goes purple, he makes these terrible gasping movements, there's no way, he's bleeding like crazy through the umbilical vessels. This child is no hope for this kid. And as you stand there helplessly, the cord comes down like a cable of steel and stops the bleeding. The holes in the heart close, the blood reverses direction. The blood vessel from the lungs clamps down, the blood hits the lungs. At exactly the same moment, he takes his first breath. And about 3 minutes later, it's all reversed and he's doing fine. That must have taken a lot of chimpanzees in the trees to get right during evolution. You know, there must have been a lot of chimpanzees that didn't make it. Why don't you give some of these chairs to those ladies? Just pass the chairs back. Why don't you give this chair to the ladies at the back? We got to give them chairs. They go through this thing, which is, we got to recognize it, right? We need them, right? So when we talk about a woman who's able to go through that birth experience, she has experienced in her body an impossible inversion. It's not funny when you're going through it. But a woman in labor who's experiencing those pains, which looks and seems impossible, when she holds that baby, that child in her arms, and realizes that every pain is the reason this child came into the world, she wouldn't give up for a moment. You know, there's a reason that we talk about Chevlei Mashiach. We say that when the Mashiach comes, it will be a birth process. And the Gemara says it's so painful, could be so painful. One of the statements in the Gemara is, let it come, but let me not see it. That means the pain we might have to go through to get to the other side of that labor experience. You know, we have a classic work on the halachot of death and burial and mourning. That's called the Gesher HaChaim. In the third part of that book, of that work, he talks about the philosophy or the Ashkafa, a little bit of Kabbalah. What is the journey of the neshama after death? But one of the things he says is that lo aleinu, when you stand at a grave and someone's being buried, you should know that within the morning, you should know that this person's entering a dimension which makes this one pale into insignificance. By the way, that's why it's halacha, you should not cry too much when somebody dies. Not too much. Because of lack of emunah. He gives a mashal, which is classic. He says, imagine two twins in the womb, which is the most idyllic experience within the mother's body, learning Torah. Mi yitneini ki yarchei kerem. Who could give me like those months in my mother's womb? Ki me Elokai yishmereni. And suddenly, after months of this blissful existence, these tremors begin, and a child, one baby is born. The child who remains in the womb mourns for the child who must have died. Little does he know that that's where life begins. And of course, the reason here, when our Rachamim, the Rambam, the Gesher HaChaim, when they give us a mashal of birth for death, that's exactly the mashal. The transition from this world to the next world is exactly presaged by the experience of birth from the previous world to this one. They're both a process of birth. And that's why when history reaches its end, we'll have what's called Chevlei Mashiach. And we have midrashim that say that the final war against us will be impossible. It'll be a war where the proofs are against us, where we have no hope. The Ramban says the final war will take place in Israel, with all the Western nations attacking Israel, using the Arabs as the point of attack. Again, we don't know exactly what it means, but we know it will be you know that there's a medrash that says that just before the Mashiach arrives, the Arabs will have a building on the Har HaBayit. Amazing. This is midrashim written before Islam became a religion. One midrash says Melech HaArvim. One midrash says Bnei Yishmael. No mistake who we're talking about. If the rabbi is kind enough to, or somebody from Chazaq, if you contact me, I'll send you the midrashim. You can print them out for the people. So here's what the midrash says. Just before the Mashiach arrives, the Bnei Yishmael will have a building on the Har HaBayit. How do Chazal know that? At that critical moment, the leaders of the Jews go to the Arabs and they say, remove your building, we want to build a Bet HaMikdash. The Arabs say, no, it's our holy place. Sound familiar? Then the Arabs turn to the Jews and they say, why should we make a battle? Let's make a test of emunah. We have emunah, in case you hadn't noticed. They're ready to die at a moment's notice for their religion. Rav Moshe Shapiro used to say, halavai aleinu, that we had that attachment to our faith. So they say to the Jews, let's make a test. You Jews build a mizbech and put a korban on. You make an altar and put a sacrifice. We'll do the same. Let's see if fire comes min hashamayim for which of our sacrifices. But we make a deal with you. If Hashem accepts ours, you join our religion. If he accepts yours, we follow the Torah. And the Jews agree. The Arabs build a mizbech, they put a sacrifice, so do we. Fire comes min hashamayim for the Arabs' offering. We're talking about a test of emunah. These are labor pains. Looks like death. The Arabs turn to the Jews and they say, we had a deal. The Jews say, never. Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. There's a battle. Those who survive flee to the desert, and after 30 days of hiding in the desert, the Mashiach arrives. Beautiful midrash. He goes to Hebron, he wakes up the Avot, he takes him out of the Machpelah. I once asked Rav Simcha Wasserman, one of the great sages of the last generation, will it be like that? He said to me, it will be exactly like that. Well, we know what a labor is, right? It looks like the opposite. And only when all of that happens, it inverts. And that is what we can expect. Obviously, when you're expecting it, it's easier. When a woman's in labor, knowing that these pains bring about a birth, so it helps. That's called emunah. Emunah means walking through, going through the darkness. Emunah doesn't mean blind faith. Emunah means to be ne'eman. Ne'eman means to hold strong. The non-Jewish world translates emunah as blind faith, a leap of faith, blind belief. That's useless. Emunah is not blind belief. Emunah means to be ne'eman. Vahayu yadav emunah. Doesn't mean they were faith. It means they were faithful. That's the woman's work. The Zohar says that the man's work is emet, and the woman's work is emunah. Ihu emet, ihi emunah. This is traditionally why men study Gemara, to get clarity. But women are the ones who make it happen. Think about the birth of a child. What does the man contribute? Half a genetic code, that's all. There's no pain. There's no staying power. The woman walks the long walk of pregnancy through the difficulty and the discomfort and the crisis of birth. That's why women have always pulled us through when it came to the crisis. At Mitzrayim it was the women. At Chazaq it was Yehudit. At Purim it was Esther. Because women have the ability to go through the darkness, knowing, of course, that it's true. Rambam says that life is like standing on a dark plain on a stormy night. You stand there beaten by the wind and lashed by the rain and hopelessly lost. And at the moment of greatest despair, suddenly there's a flash of lightning. In that moment you see the road clearly, and as you see it, the light disappears. And the rest of the night you walk through the storm on memory alone of a flash that you once saw. That's called emunah. Doesn't mean you're going through the darkness with no idea at all. You have a clarity. We know who we are. We stood at Sinai and Hashem gave us a Torah. But now we walk the long walk through Midbar Ha'amim, where we don't see anything. All we see is everyone against us. We don't see any nisim, any nevuah. That's emunah, is the womanly skill of being able to walk through the crisis of labor and birth. Well, I'm good. Thank you. And that's why on Friday night, which is the premonition of the week becoming Shabbat, which is the forerunner of the world becoming Mashiach, that's a woman's moment. And that's why we say about Yitzchak, she has the capacity now to laugh. By the way, the Gemara says something amazing. As the baby is born and everything inverts itself, this is Gemara Nida in Chavtet. The Gemara says, amazing. The Gemara describes the whole process of birth in one line. It says, when a baby is born, what's opened closes and what's closed opens. Isn't that beautiful? You couldn't say it more beautifully than that. Niftach hasatum, what is closed opens, and what's open closes. The whole obstetric anatomy, right, in one sentence. But that's what a woman is, and she can do that. And that's why Esther is the one who's hidden. That's the hilarity of Purim. And that's the humor of Jewish history. Haman makes a gallows to hang Mordechai. So the Midrash says he climbed up and he put his neck in to make sure that it would fit. And Gavriel HaMalach came down and said, suits you. Yoshev Shamayim, the one who sits in Shamayim, is laughing because wherever you look at Torah, you see the same thing. Here's Pharaoh. He's sitting on his throne. He makes a decree to have every baby killed. Every boy is going to be killed. To be sure that this Redeemer will not live. The Midrash says he had Egyptian babies killed. You know that? Because his astrologers could not tell him if the Redeemer would be Jewish or Egyptian, because Moshe was a bit of both. So to make sure he has all the boys killed, and on his knee, he's raising the child. That's very funny. It's not funny when you're going through it. But this is the classic inversion of Jewish history. And therefore, every event in Torah, which looks like a destruction. We have a whole work on that, the Da'at Tvunot of the Ramchal. He goes through this systematically to demonstrate how the tragedies and torments of history are labor pains that bring about, and therefore when the child's born, it's not laughing because we're happy. It's the hysteria, it's the humor of seeing an inversion. You know that we have the first Jewish child ever born is called laughter, Yitzchak. Right? Avram begins the process, and he has a child called, it's a very weird name for a child. Yitzchak means, of course it means he shall laugh. We're not talking about laughing now. What in English we call that the last laugh. Why is he called Yitzchak? Because he's impossible. His parents are too old. His father's too old. His mother's too old. She has no womb. The Gemara says she had no womb. So Hashem says to them, you'll have a child. So they laugh. Of course they laugh. Laughter is the response to an impossibility. So the child is born. He's called laughter. And what happens when he's old enough to get married? Hashem says to his father, now kill him. You know, Torah is one big comedy. You have to understand it, right? It's one big... So Avram takes Yitzchak, and he takes the knife, and the Torah tells us that Yitzchak survived. But the Zohar says he was killed. Because the Midrash says, Efrosh shel Yitzchak munach lefanai. The ashes of Yitzchak remain on the Mizbeach. Well, the question is, did he die or not? Both. Is that possible? No, but it happened. We begin where the impossible ends. That's called Chiyat HaMeitim. The Zohar says when the knife approached his neck, his neshama left, and when the knife receded, his neshama came back. Actually, according to the Zohar, the neshama that left was unable to have children, and it came back in a female form, which enabled him to have children, which means that the death experience enabled him to give life. And what happens? Yitzchak becomes an individual. The next incident in Torah is he goes and gets married and founds a nation. So here's a person, his father puts him through a death experience, and that enables him to father a nation that's indestructible. And since that moment, for the last 4,000 years, they've been trying to kill us, and we're the only ones who are still here. That's very funny. The Tikkunei Zohar says Yitzchak spells Ketz Chai. That means death in life. Yitzchak, Ketz Chai. That means the next world in this world. And from that moment, the Jew becomes a person walking around in this world with his head in another world. That is the humor. And that's why Jews have such a good sense of humor. We understand that life's a joke. We understand this is a labor pains that are giving birth to a new reality. You know, our story begins in Mitzrayim, right? In Egypt. Where does that begin? With the Shvatim, the 12 tribes, the brothers standing in front of Yosef, right? In Mitzrayim. What's the story? They go through a torment that lasted years, more than 20 years. They made a mistake, they sold their brother, their father lost his nevuah. They were conscious that they destroyed Jewish history. And it lasted for years. And then it became a crisis. And this weird Egyptian starts tormenting them. No idea what's going on. Right? Bizarre suffering. And finally they stand in front of Yosef. They don't know that it's Yosef. And he says to them, you can all go home, just leave Binyamin with me. And at that moment the world ended. Because at that moment there were only two options. Go home and leave Binyamin, which means that Yaakov sees them in the distance and he sees Binyamin's not there, he dies of grief immediately. Or kill everyone. The Midrash says they were superhuman in their powers. They could have killed the whole of Egyptian society, mass murder. That was the only options left to them. At that moment of impossible despair, Yehuda steps forward and he says to Yosef, I don't know what this means. I don't know who you are and why you're doing this to us, but I know that we're responsible. And I know one thing. I promised my father I'd bring him home. And therefore, please, take me, let him go. At that moment of a complete, utter, hopeless self-sacrifice, they hear the words, Ani Yosef. You! The source of the problem. Not the cavalry riding in from, you! And in that moment, all the years of suffering They realize there's a tikkun. Of course, they weren't laughing, because when you're going through it, it's not funny at all. But when you're watching this, that's hysterical. And suddenly in that moment when they hear that this is Yosef, every single bizarre event in their life all has meaning. Now they know exactly that they've been corrected and everything was necessary. They wouldn't give it up for a moment. One moment before, they're regretting their lives. The next moment, they suddenly cherish every moment of suffering. And we're going to go through that. When the Mashiach arrives, we'll go through this realization. You know what's even more strange is that the Ramchal says the reason to study Kabbalah, I'm sure you study Kabbalah in your community, right? I'm sure you study Kabbalah, don't you? I'm sure you're dedicated to doing Kiruv and Kabbalah, right? He says the purpose of Kabbalah is to understand how history is working. That's why we study Kabbalah. There are different opinions, but his opinion is if you study Kabbalah, you know how history is working out. And you see what's happening beneath the surface. And therefore, as they're going through every step of the... And yet, it's very hard to see. You look in the story of Yosef, you see that time after time he gave them clues to who he was. And they couldn't see it. First of all, they saw his face, right? First of all, his face looked exactly the same as Yaakov. Rashi says he had a beard. Really? That's enough? He sat them in order of their ages. He said to Binyamin, you're unique to your mother, me, same as me. At every opportunity he gave them clues as to who he was. They could not see it. And they were looking for him. The Midrash says they went to Mitzrayim, they went through 12 different gates so they could find him. Not like they weren't thinking about him. They're looking for him. And he's looking at them. Unless you develop that sense of being able to see beneath the surface, you could be looking at it, you wouldn't recognize it. And suddenly when it turns over, how could I have not seen that? And this is the reason that you see, for example, when Rabbi Akiva is walking with his friends. You know the famous story? Rabbi Akiva is walking with his friends and they walk on the Har HaBayit. And they see the destruction. The whole Bet HaMikdash lies in ruins. And suddenly they see a fox coming out of the Kodesh Kodashim area. And all the rabbis start crying. And Rabbi Akiva starts laughing. They say, why are you laughing? He said, why are you crying? And as we're crying, we see the destruction. Why are you laughing? He says, I'm laughing because the Navi tells us two predictions. The Navi tells us that the Bet HaMikdash will be destroyed and foxes will run around the Kodesh Kodashim. And then the Navi tells us that after that, children will play in the streets of Yerushalayim. If I see the one coming true, I know the other one's going to come true. But if you're Rabbi Akiva, you can laugh now. If you're a woman, you can feel the joy of labor pains, along with the pain. Because you know where this is going. Why Rabbi Akiva? Because he is the one who is the father of the oral law, Torah Sheba'al Peh. Torah Sheba'al Peh is the incredible experience of Torah coming to an end. What does Torah Sheba'al Peh mean? The Torah comes to an end, Nevuah ends, Nisim end, no more miracles. What happened? You have to understand, what happened between Purim and Chanukah? That's when the light faded. That's where Jews could have lost hope completely. Look at Jewish history. You have 6,000 years of history, right? You know the world will last for 6,000 years. So here's 6,000 years, right? 6 days of creation, 6,000 years of history. By the way, we are here. 5784. This is where we are. Late Friday afternoon, Erev Shabbat. You can smell the cholent cooking already. Time to put on your Shabbat clothes. This is where we are. We have seen all of the prophecy coming true in Jewish history, except for the final showdown. Right? Late Erev Shabbos, that's where we are now. And between now and the end will be Mashiach. But these 6,000 years began with Gilui, Hashem revealing himself, miracles, Nevuah, prophecy, Hashem revealing himself, giving us Torah, and then slowly the light fades. And then about 2,300 years ago, you get Purim. What's Purim? Hashem goes into hiding. There's a Megillah, but it doesn't mention his name. Purim's not a Hebrew word. It means the luck of the draw. You don't see Hashem's hand. Esther means the hidden one. We're moving into the phase of hiddenness. The Gemara has an argument, was Esther beautiful or not? All Jewish women, all the great women of Jewish history were unbelievably beautiful. Sarah Imeinu, Dinah, the Ramban says, Abigail, they were exquisitely beautiful. Esther's an argument. One opinion, the Gemara, she was one of the 4 most beautiful women ever. The other opinion is she had a green face. You know, the Midrash says, by the way, that Esther was 75 years old at the time that the king took her for a wife. 75 years old. You know what's amazing? Here's this Persian king. He's having all these young girls collected from out the whole kingdom, right? All these young, eligible girls. They must have been stunning, those girls. And then, they pickled them in perfumes, and, it's enough to drive a feminist totally crazy, 6 months, they pickled them in perfumes and oils. So these girls, these Persian girls, must have been unbelievably stunning. And among them, they bring in a lady, 75 years old, married with a green face. What were they thinking? And she's the one the king found beautiful.
That is a miracle.
She had a chen. In other words, we're moving now from the revealed to the hidden, where the beauty has to be inner. And the Megillah doesn't mention Hashem's name. Megillah in Hebrew means to roll up, and it also means megaleh, to reveal. And what's the nace of Purim? Well, the king couldn't sleep, he had a wife, he didn't know she was Jewish, a whole bunch of coincidences that the Jewish people see the meaning. And 150 years later is Hanukkah, where there's nothing at all. Nothing. There's no Megillah, there's not even a Mishnah, there's nothing about it. The only thing is, at the end of the war, some candles burned for 8 days, which was a wave goodbye from the world of miracles. And since then, we've seen nothing. So Purim Hanukkah, according to Kabbalah, Purim and Hanukkah are the legs of history. Right and left legs. Legs means outside of the body. We're now moving beyond the body. Am I speaking too long? Can I take another minute? There's an amazing, the Gemara says that the Chachamim were meeting in the time of the Mishnah. They were arguing about a certain halachic object. So the Chachamim took a view, led by Rabbi Yeshua, and Rabbi Eliezer disagreed. So he was in the minority. And he was their teacher. He's called Rabbi Eliezer HaGadol. But he had one opinion, and they all disagreed with him. So obviously you take a vote, right? But he didn't accept the vote. They knew that he knew more than them, but they didn't understand what he was saying. What happens if you are in the minority, and you know the majority is wrong? You have to prove what you're saying. He tried his best to explain. They didn't understand. He said, if I'm right, I want that tree outside to get up and walk. The tree got up and it walked 100 paces. Rabbi Yeshua said, we don't bring proofs from carob trees. Rabbi Eliezer said, if I'm right, I want that river to turn around and the water should flow backwards. The water flowed uphill. They said, we don't bring proofs from streams of water. These were not Hasidim, you understand. These were Lithuanians, Then he said, if I'm right, I want the walls of the Bet Midrash to cave in. So the walls started falling. Out of respect to him, they fell. Out of respect to Rabbi Yeshua, they remained suspended. So the Chachamim looked at the walls and they said, we don't bring proofs from the walls of the Bet Midrash. Then Rabbi Eliezer said, if I'm right, I want a voice to be heard. You know whose voice? And they heard a voice. The voice said, Ma'itchem etzel Rabbi. What do you want from Rabbi Eliezer? He's right in everything that he says. The Gemara says, Amar Rabbi Yeshua al Raglav. Rabbi Yeshua got to his feet and he said, Lo b'shamayim hi. The Torah is not in heaven, and they outvoted the voice. Later, one of the Chachamim saw Eliyahu Navi, and he said to him, what was Hashem doing when he took that vote? And I said, Hashem was smiling and saying, Nitzchuni banai, Nitzchuni banai. My children have defeated me, my children have defeated me. what is going on? Human beings outvoting Hashem, what does this mean? Now, you know, the Arizal has a commentary on the Gemara, Al Pi Kabbalah. And when he deals with this Gemara, he asks only one question. This is a Gemara, you can ask a lot of questions, right? You got a tree walking up and down, you got a river flowing backwards, there's like... He says there's only one difficulty in this Gemara. Why does it say Amad Rabbi Yeshua al Raglav? That's the problem. Why does it Rabbi Yeshua got to his feet? Like in English you say, he stood up and he said. Says the Arizal, that's the key to the whole Gemara. Because Torah Sheba'al Peh is the legs of history. Now we move beyond the body into the legs. The legs in Kabbalah are called Netzach and Hod. Now we move Amad Yeshua al Raglav. Now Hashem walks on our legs. Now the Torah means in the world what we say it means. He trusts us. By the way, listen to these words. Nitzchuni banai, netzach, netzach. That's the midah we get to now. So Torah Sheba'al Peh is where, amazingly, Torah comes to an end, and we take over, amazingly. The prophets end, Chagai, Zechariah, Malachi, the last Navi, and the voice goes silent. No more hearing from Hashem. What do the Jewish people lay down and die? No, we start making up Torah ourselves. Of course, 100% loyal to the sources. That's called Torah Sheba'al Peh. We carry it forward. And Rabbi Akiva is the one who can do that. And that's very funny. That's the miracle of Purim. Purim is when they tried to kill us and they brought to the world an acceptance of Torah that was unprecedented. You know, every festival, every Chag brings a new Nes and a new Torah to the world. Think about it. Every festival, every Chag brings a new miracle. Pesach, Hashem spoke to us. Sukkot is the Ananei Kavod. Right? Shavuot, Hashem spoke. Pesach was the Nisim of Mitzrayim. Chanukah is a Nes. Purim. Every festival brings a new miracle and new Torah. And Purim is the miracle. And that's Rabbi Akiva. He's the one who can laugh when he sees that the destruction is a moment of birth. You know, if you permit me just a couple of minutes, I'll tell you something very beautiful. Again, I heard this from Rav Shapira. Very beautiful. You know that the Gemara says that at Pesach, Shavuot, we accepted the Torah. But after that, the Jewish people said, well, Hashem, we're not so sure that we're obliged, because you held the mountain over us. The language in the Gemara is Moda'a Rabba La'iraita. That means Hashem held the mountain over us and he threatened us. You know the Midrash? Betachtit Har. Which means Hashem held the mountain over the Jewish people. He said, you want more Torah? If not, I kill you. So the Jewish people accepted the Torah. So the Gemara says, but if that's how we accept Torah, later we can say, you forced us. If you sign a contract at gunpoint, it's not valid. That's clear, right? So Hashem gives us the Torah, we stand under the mountain, he threatens to kill us, we accept the Torah. So the Gemara says, we're not obliged. Answers the Gemara, yeah, you know why you're obliged? Because at Purim, you accepted it voluntarily. I wasn't present at Purim. I didn't show my face. I hid myself. Esther means the one who's hidden. And then you did tshuva. They fasted for 3 days. They did tshuva. So when you accepted the Torah at Purim, you're bound. Admittedly, Pesach, Shavuot, can't hold you accountable. But Purim? No, yeah. You didn't see me. I never held a mountain over you. That's why you're obliged. Incidentally, why did Hashem hold us accountable in between? You see the problem? Here's the Jewish people. They come to Sinai, Hashem gives them the Torah, and then we move on. Oh, Hashem, we're not accountable, you forced us. So why did he punish us for all these years? Before Purim? Is the question clear? The answer is that when we accepted the Torah at Purim, we didn't accept it then. That showed that we meant business when we accepted it before. You go to a wedding. You're standing there, beautiful chuppah, white roses, you know, Chatan Kala, and the rabbi's making a speech like rabbis do. And this rabbi is going on a little bit long, as some rabbis do. So while the rabbi's talking, you walk around the back of the chuppah, and you suddenly see that the father of the Khatan standing with a sawn-off shotgun in the back of the Khatan. I would say that puts a different complexion on what's going on. The boy gives the girl a ring, but there's a shotgun in his back. Then you think to himself, but 1 second, maybe he actually wants to marry her. Maybe the father's got a problem. I don't know. Either he's being forced, or the father's got an issue. So you wait until 2 o'clock in the morning when the dancing's over, and you see, does the boy head for the hills, or does he take the girl home? If he takes the girl home, then he was willing. The father had an issue. Is this clear? And therefore, when Hashem forced us, that doesn't mean we weren't willing. We said Na'aseh v'nishma. Hashem wanted to force us. The Maharal explains why. But later, when Hashem did not force us, and we continued keeping Torah, then you see that we meant it when we accepted it before. The problem is, I'll finish with this, it's getting late, but I'll tell you this. The problem is, there's a very interesting discussion. This is for people who want to think about something. The Rambam in the laws of Kiddush Hashem, the Rambam has an incredible contradiction between two laws. Listen carefully, it's worth thinking about this. Kiddush Hashem, when you have to die to sanctify Hashem's name. So the Rambam says, if somebody forces you to do something wrong in order to not die, eat unkosher food, break Shabbat, you do it. But not three things. Sexual immorality, murder, and avodah zarah. That you're not allowed to do. So imagine someone puts a gun to somebody's head and says, I'll kill you unless you do this avodah zarah. So you're not allowed to do it. What happens if you do it? The Rambam says you're not accountable. Bet Din cannot punish you. You were afraid to die. 2 lines later, the Rambam says, what if a person's about to die from a disease? And to save their life, they do the same avodah zarah. 100% guilty, the Bet Din will punish you. What's the difference? Why is a person not accountable when he's about to get a bullet in his head if he fails to sanctify Hashem's name and he does the Isur? Or it's a disease that's about to kill him and he does the same Isur. In both cases, he's doing it to save his life. Ladies, gentlemen, did we hear the problem?
The belief.
What?
The belief. That's it.
What's the belief?
That he thinks that.
In both cases, he believes that if he doesn't do it, he's going to die, and if he does the Isur, he'll be saved. In both cases. What's the difference if a bullet or...
He believes in the thing that he's worshiping. Maybe he's...
Why should he believe it? He's only doing it to save his life.
The pressure.
What?
Pressure.
Pressure.
No, he believes that the saving is going to come from that, no?
In both cases.
How is it in both cases? Someone's forcing him in the other case.
Because in one instance, there's a human involved. Because in the first instance, there's a human involved, and with the second one...
What difference does that make? I'm doing it to save my life. I know you know. What's the difference if it's a human or a disease? I'm doing it to save my life. I'm going to use this forbidden substance, which is idolatry. What's the difference if I'm doing it to save myself from a bullet or from a disease?
Because it's right here in front of you. It's here.
The disease is right here, eating its way through my brain, right here.
May have hope that it will go away.
The guy might decide not to kill me.
The gun is going to kill
You're going out of your
versus
way.
the disease.
In both cases, you're going out of your way to do the same thing.
Not really. You're being forced.
The gun
Yes.
is external. The disease came.
So?
From your head, it's like mentally. It's what you believe, that's what I'm trying to say. Well, isn't the gun going to kill you faster than the disease?
Let's say with a disease, that's for sure, that's large.
They're both for sure. They're both equally sure.
But with disease, that's definitely
Oh,
God's plan,
choice.
but man
If you have a choice.
has the...
What's the difference? In both cases, I'm trying to save my life. What difference is it what the reason is that the threat's coming to me?
The choice is within you when it's in your head, and when it's outside of you, then the choice is, someone's forcing you.
Maybe the emunah.
The answer is this. Listen carefully. The answer is this. Some of you are saying correctly. When someone forces you to do something forbidden, they're forcing you. When you're about to die of a disease and you do the forbidden action, you choosing. Say it again. If somebody puts a gun to your head and you bow down to this forbidden whatever it is, they forced you. You could have died, that's true, but what you did was you allowed yourself to be forced. When you're about to die from a disease and you choose to do the Isur, the disease is not forcing you. I'll give you a proof. Listen carefully, here's a proof. 4 o'clock in the morning, you wake up, there's a gun to your head. Fellow says, get out of bed. I know that you have a neighbor with a lot of money in his safe, and I know you know the combination of the safe. I want you to open your neighbor's safe. And at gunpoint, he walks you across into the neighbor's house and you open the safe. Are you guilty?
No.
Clearly not. Saving your life, right? 4 o'clock in the morning, you wake up, a gun to your head. The fellow says, give me all your money. You say, I got a neighbor. That's your ratzon. It's true, you don't kill you save your life. So listen carefully, this is amazing. This is clear, all our great commentaries say this. If someone forces you, you're not accountable because it's his will. If it's your will, a disease threatens you, the disease doesn't force you to do the forbidden action, you choose. Okay, now listen carefully. When Hashem gave us the Torah, you know why we're not accountable? Because He forced us. Hashem said, accept my Torah, I'll kill you. Clear? At Purim, Hashem didn't force us, right? What are you talking about? They threatened to kill us. What are you saying? Purim, they threatened to wipe out every Jew. What do you mean there was no pressure? How can the Gemara say that on Purim we accepted it voluntarily? They were threatening to kill every Jew.
Their choice.
The answer is that when Hashem held the mountain over us, He forced us to accept Torah. When the Persians threatened to kill us, they didn't force us to do anything. We chose to do tshuva. No Persian said, Jew, do tshuva. The Persian said, Jew, I'm going to kill you because you're a Jew. We decided to do tshuva. Is this clear?
Yeah.
Of course, my friends, that's called second-class tshuva.
Second class.
Because it's tshuva meira. That's not good, but it's valid. And that's why the Gemara says before the Mashiach comes, we'll do tshuva big time. The only argument in the Gemara is, will we do tshuva spontaneously? Or will we have a king whose decrees are evil as Haman, a nuclear weapon on its way from Iran?
But isn't that already happening with Hamas?
So the question will be, will that be tshuva? And when it happens because they threaten us, it's second-class tshuva.
Isn't that
One second. You see it's not working, right? So that is the question. And therefore, the bottom line, of course, is we don't want to do second-class tshuva when they threaten us. What you want to do is first-class tshuva. You give all your money to Chazaq. Right? And to the rabbi and the Sephardic community of Hewlett. That's what you do. You bring in everybody. You tell them now is the time, not when they're threatening us. And that will lead to the laughter of the end of time. That is the tzchok. Az yemale tzchok pinu. Then our mouth will be full of laughter. It doesn't just mean we'll be enjoying ourselves. It means then we'll see that the torture of history inverted itself. And that's Purim. That's the masking of Purim. That's why we do all these weird things in Purim. We wear masks like the wicked people instead of... Because at the end of history, v'nahafoch. And it's v'nahafoch that causes humor. I'll leave you with this thought. And that is, what's the halacha lema'aseh? What do you leave? What practical message do you take? The practical message is you need to know very soon the whole world will turn upside down. I mean, think about it for a moment. I said, again, here's a nation that's been subject to real attempt of genocide for 4,000 years, and they're accusing, and when we defend ourselves, they accuse us of genocide. I mean, aren't you ashamed to say things like that? You're talking about a complete opposite. So the message is like this. From now on, you live upside down. No, from now on, you walk around on your head. Raise your children totally opposite to every value out there. Every immoral value and every violent thing that they're doing and all the entertainment and all the secular attitudes. You raise your children exactly the opposite. Make your child walk around on his head.
Amen.
Because as soon as the Mashiach comes, v'nafoch will be the right way up. So we follow, we drive like Oscar, right, on the highway. I'll leave you with one story. I can tell you a story, right? Here's one story you can take home. The man's driving in the car with his friend. He's sitting there, the friend's driving. They come to a red light. His friend goes right through the red light. So what are you doing? His friend says, no, don't worry, my brother always does. Next red light, speeds right through the red light. You'll get us killed. Don't worry, my brother always does. Third red light, straight through the red light. How can you drive like that? Don't worry, my brother always does this. Next light's green, screeches to a halt. He says, what are you doing now? He says, no, man, in case my brother's coming through.